Shinjutsu, the pinnacle of chakra manipulation in the Boruto Universe. Well, to be more precise, Shinjutsu pretty much allows the user to perform chakra-based techniques without the use of hand signs. Though there are techniques within the universe that don't necessarily require hand signs but are still classified as Ninjutsu, not Shinjutsu. That's because there is an added qualifier to this classification, which would be the divine nature of the abilities themselves. You see, as revealed in chapter 75, Shinjutsu are godlike abilities that are neither ninjutsu nor sage techniques. They were instead classified as phenomena equivalent to divine miracles. Now, just to be clear, Shinjutsu does require you to have chakra in order to use it, but one doesn't need to concentrate by weaving hand signs in order to mold it, as seen with ninjutsu or senjutsu. With that being said, we have at least 14 established Shinjutsu abilities in the Boruto universe at this point in time, so I'm going to use this video to explain all of them.
So what will you do? You vulgar creatures train and persevere endlessly and pointlessly, all for nothing.
Let's get started with one of the most overpowered abilities in the entire franchise, known as Temporal Rewind. Now, this technique is absolutely broken, and of course I'll explain why. How it works is that in preparation of being attacked, the user activates their Renegon as glowing blue, and then the technique allows them to warp several seconds into the past. Now, while normally defensive, essentially allowing the user to seemingly teleport away from danger, repeated usage of the technique itself grants a pseudo form of clairvoyance. So using the acquired knowledge of how the near future will happen, a perfect counter strategy can be formed from being able to tell how the enemy will move. So in the hands of anyone not named Urashiki or Tsutsuki, it's almost impossible to lose. With that said, our next ability is the Shinjutsu known as Karma. Now, this jutsu is absolutely broken in the sense that it pretty much allows your Tsutsuki to attain a form of immortality by constantly resurrecting within a new body. To be more specific, the Karma Seal is stated to be an highly compressed Otsutsuki backup file. This compressed file slowly extracts over time, and once all of that data is fully extracted, the Otsutsuki who implanted it would then fully resurrect within that body. So the concept itself is pretty simple. We've actually seen a version of this technique before in the form of Orochimaru's Curse Seal. This allowed him to impart his powerful Senjutsu chakra to someone imbued with his curse mark, which then allowed them to enter a curse mark state or undergo sage transformation. It was also later revealed that a copy of his consciousness is stored within the seal itself, which is why Sasuke was able to resurrect him during the war. So it's pretty clear what influenced the creation of the Karma Seal itself. Even so, the Karma Seal still goes way beyond that, in the sense that it's also capable of converting your Otsutsuki data within it to another person's component, while still remaining genetically Otsutsuki at its core. That's how Boruto became 100% Otsutsuki while still retaining his own essence. Also note that the process of overwriting the vessel only overlays the Otsutsuki data onto the existing human data until the Otsutsuki chooses to resurrect. That's why vessels like Jigen retained his human form for years, even though he was 100% Ishiki Otsutsuki. Oh, and the Karma Seal itself also provides the vessel with the ability to absorb pure chakra-based attacks, use space-time vortex, and also amplifies their physical prowess as well as their abilities. Next, we have the space-time Shinjutsu. Now, this technique appears to be innate to all Otsutsukis, even the ones without Renegons such as Kinshiki and Ishiki Otsutsuki. It pretty much allows them to travel to different locations by manipulating a specific point in space. There's also a more potent form of this technique known as Yamotsu Hirasaka, which is also said to be the progenitor of all space-time techniques. In essence, it pretty much allows the user to open rifts in the fabric of space that then allows them to instantaneously transport themselves to different locations. The openings can also be used to connect different spatial locations within the same dimension, or even to create pathways that links two dimensions together. These pathways can then allow the user to retreat, disorient enemies, or execute ambush attacks at a moment's notice. That then brings us to Daemon's Reflection ability, which is one of the most overpowered abilities in the entire franchise. You see, Daemon was implanted with the cells of Shibai Otsutsuki, along with being genetically modified, which is what led to his immense strength. In addition to that, he also received a reflection ability, and in essence, this allows Daemon to reflect all attacks if he's touching someone with his palm. and it also allows him to reflect intent, which doesn't require him to touch anyone. So it's basically a 2-in-1 ability, which allows him to reflect intent, whether it be murderous or damaging in any way. And it's also stated by Ada that the stronger the intent to kill, the more powerful the reflection will be. A foe simply picturing the killing scene will cause the end result to be instantly reflected upon them. This was shown when Kawaki tried thinking about slapping Damon to test his abilities. The slap itself was reflected upon Kawaki without Damon needing to touch anyone. This is similar to how he was able to reflect the guard's intent to cut off his head without needing to touch anyone there as well. Then you have the other reflection ability that allows him to reflect launched attacks as long as his palms are touching someone else. This was seen when Kawaki tried to attack Damon with a strike in chapter 74, and it was also seen back in chapter 67 as well when Code brought Damon to the battlefield in the middle of Kawaki's attack, which was then reflected. There's also this time when Code tried to place his claw marks on Damon that were also then reflected, even though Code had no intent to harm him. Now there are also times when physical attacks are launched at Damon but were not reflected. For example, when Damon first fought Boruto, but Boruto's kicks nor his intent to kick Damon was reflected, even though he was touching Boruto with his palm. By the way, the reflection ability does still work on the person he's touching if they choose to attack him. This was shown when Code's intent to scratch Damon with his claw was reflected, as pointed out by Code himself. So what this likely implies is that Damon is capable of disabling the ability if he so chooses to do so, thus being able to fight normally, which then explains why Boruto's attacks weren't reflected in this specific instance. Another important thing to point out is that there are no existing counters to this ability. Some might argue that you might be able to bypass it using Genjutsu, sealing jutsus, or by fighting Damon without the intent to harm him. However, this just isn't true. Let's use Ada as an example. Her charm ability prevents you from causing her any physical harm. Even if you want to do so, you physically can't do it, as seen when Code tried to slice her with his claws. Now what you likely didn't notice is that Code was able to place his claw marks on her body. The reason why this is possible is because the claw mark itself doesn't cause harm. This was explained by Ada when Shikamaru was able to restrict her movements using shadow paralysis. The reason why he was able to do so is because the jutsu itself doesn't directly inflict harm. So the same logic would apply to Code's claw mark. Yet, as seen in chapter 60, Damon's reflection ability reflected Code's claw mark onto him, which means that it doesn't matter whether your ability indirectly or directly causes harm, it will still be reflected. So Genjutsu, sealing jutsu, shadow paralysis, it doesn't matter. All of them would still be reflected, even though they don't directly cause any physical harm. Also note that his ability does transfer to the person currently touching him, which means that any attack directed towards them will also be reflected. Up next, we have the tool creation technique. Now this ability doesn't have a name, so we're just gonna call it what it is, which is an ability used to create tools. So in essence, the user has the ability to manifest special red glowing malleable chakra, which when on standby floats behind their back. The user is then able to manipulate it to form various makeshift tools and weapons similar to the truth-seeking orbs. Now there is another variant of this ability which manifests in the form of Urashiki's fishing rod. It is a tool created from chakra, but it possesses different abilities, such as the ability to penetrate strong defenses and extract chakra, thus imbuing the user with the ability of the person it was extracted from. Though it does seem like you're only able to take one ability at a time. That then brings us to Momoshiki's Renegon abilities. Now these abilities also weren't given a name per se, but they are indeed Shinjutsu abilities of Momoshiki's Renegons. To be more precise, the right hand Renegon allows Momoshiki to absorb any chakra-based techniques, then augment it and discharge it using the left Renegon. The right Renegon also seems to allow Momoshiki to turn living beings into chakra fruits, as seen with Kinshiki, though it isn't clear if this extends to Nanotsutsuki since he never did this to his opponents, so we'll have to wait and see, I guess. Up next, we have the Deep Crimson Spiral. Now this Shinjutsu is simply an amplified version of the Rasengan Momoshiki absorbed using his right Renegon. The change in properties gives it a reddish color and also increases the size and potency of the technique itself. Next up, we have the Black Receivers. Now these are said to be a trademark of the Renegon, but we've seen characters use them without the Renegon, such as Ishiki Otsutsuki, and by extension Kawaki, the vessel of Ishiki. These rods can be used to absorb chakra restrict movements and can also be used to transmit impulse signals into specific targets. Up next, we have Code's Claw Mark, and this is also a space-time Shinjutsu by the way, but I kept it separate from the initial category because it's somewhat different or more special in some sense. So it basically basically allows Ko to travel from one point to the next, just like space-time ninjutsu, but he's also able to use it as an attack, as seen when he used it to shrink the Ten Tails and created the Claw Grimes, and it's more so similar to Flying Thunder God since he's able to place the claw mark on individuals and objects and then later use it to access that location. Next up we have Sukuna Hikona. Now this is an ability of Ishiki's unnamed dojutsu, which pretty much allows him to shrink to a very small size. Now this ability also works on objects and jutsus, but it doesn't work on living beings aside from Ishiki himself, so he can't just shrink people, so that's one limitation of it. Now this ability can be broken if used properly, since Jigen was able to shrink his rods to a very small size, then insert them into your body and expand them instantaneously. So if you want someone who possesses insane regen or plot armor, then this ability might take you out. Up next we have Daikokuten or Daikokuten. Now this ability pretty much allows Ishiki to send you to a dimension where time doesn't flow. And you can also store objects, food, clothing, plant life, it doesn't matter. And as seen with Ishiki, the ability is actually quite fast, with objects almost appearing instantaneously. So if you aren't fast enough, he can pretty much neg you by dropping a cube on top of your head, or by just sending you to a dimension where time doesn't flow, thus freezing you in time. Now before we get to the next one on the list, I'm seeing that almost 83% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel, which is absolutely insane. So if you guys are enjoying the content, just hit subscribe, like the video and get it into the algorithm. That would mean a lot to me. So just get it done and let's move on with the video. Now next up we have the Senringan, which is simply a dojutsu ability that can project one's consciousness to any location to see or hear any present event. And this also applies to events taking place in a different dimension, as well as any past event up until the moment of their birth. Though there is one limitation, which is that they cannot perceive events within a separate spiritual plane or mental plane. That then brings us to Omnipotence. You see, in Boruto chapter 79, Ada's true ability was finally revealed, and the name of that ability is Omnipotence. Momoshiki later explained that Omnipotence is an ultimate power only an all-knowing almighty god can wield. It's a programming language that the gods were said to have used to create worlds. The will to make anything real, that's what Omnipotence is. So in essence, Omnipotence is a reality warping technique that allows the user to bend reality to his will. But there are some key details we need to address. Now Ada was first introduced as a character who has a charm ability which pretty much makes everyone infatuated with her, anyone aside from Otsutsukis and blood relatives. She was then stated to have received this ability after she was implanted with the cells of Shiba Otsutsuki himself. The scientist who ran these experiments, known as Amado, confirmed that he didn't manufacture the abilities using Shiba's cells. The abilities themselves came from Shiba. This was then somewhat later contradicted by Momoshiki when he said that he has knowledge of every Shinjutsu in existence and Ada's charm ability isn't one of them. Now what Momoshiki said was later backed up in chapter 79 when it was revealed that Ada's charm ability isn't a Shinjutsu ability stemming from the Otsutsuki. In fact, it was a new ability manifested by Ada using the power of Omnipotence. It's then explained that Ada's charm ability is just the result of Ada's subconscious desire made material by Omnipotence, because again, Omnipotence is the will to make anything real, and Ada's desire was to be loved. So in using Omnipotence, she was able to manifest that desire into a reality, thus making everyone infatuated with her. So in essence, the charm ability isn't an ability by itself, it's just a manifestation of Ada's deepest desire caused by Omnipotence. Now Momoshiki also stated that Ada can't control the ability since she isn't Otsutsuki, which is why this was all done subconsciously. We also then saw the ability being used again in chapter 79, with Ada accidentally manifesting Kawaki's desire to make Boruto an outsider. As stated by Momoshiki, this current phenomena is Kawaki's desire becoming reality. He went through Ada and invoked Omnipotence to cause you and him to switch places. So now Kawaki is the son of the 7th Hokage, and Boruto is the outsider. Momoshiki later explained that people's memories have been altered. Any common knowledge involving Boruto and Kawaki has been changed. This is possible since every person's consciousness is by nature linked through chakra, so a god could meddle with it if they so choose to do so. Now the ability does have some limitations, since Momoshiki stated that it doesn't affect the Otsutsuki fights such as Boruto and Kawaki, nor does it affect the caster. It's also confirmed that the ability doesn't affect Sarada and Sumire for some unspecified reason. So in essence, Omnipotence or Omnipotence is the most broken ability in the entire franchise. Oh, and by the way, you can't simply tell people the truth and expect Omnipotence to be reversed. In fact, it was later revealed that the ability itself is in continuous effect. So as soon as someone notices a contradiction, the ability then overwrites it once again and forces them to either forget it or accept it as it is. So the only way to reverse Omnipotence is by using Omnipotence again to change reality. That then brings us to Rasengan Usuhiko, which Boruto dubbed as a Rasengan that incorporates the planet's chakra and rotation. He then said that the power rushing through Code's body will never dissipate, just like our planet will never stop spinning. This is then backed up by Damon referring to the power as planetary spin. By the way, I did make a video that goes in depth on the inner workings of Usuhiko, so if you want the full anime science breakdown, you guys can watch that video after this one. So the summarized explanation is that the only reason why we don't perceive the Earth's rotation is because we're coupled with the Earth's surface, thus moving at the same constant speed. Boruto found a way to loosen or remove that connection, which causes Code to feel the full effects of the Earth's rotation. This causes Code's vision to get distorted and also causes an extreme case of vertigo. In addition to that, this also causes Code to experience the Coriolis effect, which affects the motions of objects that are not anchored to the Earth's surface and move relative to it, thus causing them to appear to follow a curved path due to the Earth's rotation. This effect is demonstrated by these guys throwing a ball back and forth without rotating the reference frame. As you can see, the ball travels in a straight line. However, when they try to throw the ball while the frame is rotating or spinning, it constantly curves to the right. That is known as the Coriolis effect. So in essence, Code not being able to land a hit on Boruto after the Rasengan crawled up his hand was actually the Coriolis effect causing Code to always curve away from his target. Or you could just say that it's Boruto spamming Flying Thunder God, I guess. Either way, the jutsu itself is pretty busted. Now just to be clear, this jutsu hasn't been confirmed to be a form of Shinjutsu, but Boruto being 100% Otsutsuki, pure Otsutsuki at that, and the jutsu not requiring hand signs, does point to this being his first naturally developed Shinjutsu as a new Otsutsuki. With that said, those are all the known Shinjutsu abilities in the Boruto universe. Of course, Momoshiki had different abilities like spamming the dogs and the golems and all that stuff, but those are just Momoshiki manipulating nature transformation to form those animals, so it isn't anything special really. But if I did indeed miss any Shinjutsu abilities, you guys can let me know in the comment section down below. But with that being said, again guys, if you guys like the video, drop a like, comment down below your opinions on these listed abilities, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.